here at allpointstv.com, and John put a John put a sign up here because I keep want to revert back to the old name we came under, and we did that for years, and now that we've changed it, I have to make sure that I'm up to speed here. And the studio is always. I feel like this guy, Planet the Elder, that said he was saying out of Africa something comes something always new, and out of the studio something always comes out new. We always doing something new here, and the people are very innovative. I've got to catch up with them. I'm going to start off. I've been doing a piece. I think I did about 4 articles last week on the just the incredible death of Charlie Kirk, and I didn't discuss this last week on this program, but I've been writing about it. I think I've done 4 articles. The last of which was yesterday. I did 4 articles on Facebook on this remarkable man, this remarkable young man. This man was, as you know, everybody knows now, was shot in the
Right
in
side of the neck, yeah.
right side of the neck, and the shooter really was aiming for Charlie Kirk's face. The shot landed in his neck, but he was actually shooting to obliterate this guy's face. And people are saying, well, how could he have been such an accurate shooter that is shooting from up to down? And you got the um, calculate in there the wind speed and the downward flow of the bullet and so on and so forth. Well, it wasn't a perfect shot, but we know what was being aimed at, and he came in not in the face area, but it was really a shot that was designed. If you look at the direct trajectory of the bullet, you can see that it was designed to blow this guy's face off. And by obliterating his face, you would in fact erase the memory of the person that was speaking from behind it into the void that into the vortex that was created by those who are really watering this fertile ground for those persons that can be easily influenced. And you have to keep in mind here that they're not doing this convincing people to act out in a way in which they want them to act out. They're not doing that anymore by just simply the passing of documents, which is what Louis Nizer is talking about in his very great book called The Implosion Conspiracy, where he's talking about the Rosenbergs, and that is where they were passing secrets off, national security secrets off to the Russians during the Rosenberg era. And you've heard of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, in which the Rosenbergs were passing out information. You just kind of pull out your back pocket and you pass it out and sell these national security secrets. They're not doing it that way anymore. The way they're doing it now is to put things out there and continue to create the vortex, to contextualize it so that you don't even know who the shooter is going to be, and you don't even have to order it directly from one source to another. This is what makes it so dangerous. They're not doing it in that manner anymore. What they're doing is seeding the environment, and it's like you don't when you throw a reel out, you don't know what fish you're gonna capture. Cod, catfish, whatever is out there. But if you throw it out there, you know that at some point a fish is going to bite. And sometimes you'll throw it out there and you don't get a bite in there, and you cast it somewhere else into another part of of the water, and but you know that you're going, if you stay out there long enough and you dangle that bait, you're going to eventually, you're not out there to go home. You're out there to fish until you catch something, and you're going to stay out there until at least that mission is done. You won't know how many fish you're going to catch. You don't know which fish you're going to catch, but you know by having that reel out there and continue to cast it, you're going to eventually get a fish to bite on it. And that's how they're doing it right now. They are uh, pointing out, throwing, they are creating this narrative that someone is a threat to democracy, or someone is a racist, and they keep throwing it out there. And some person thinking he's doing the common will and he's a heroic figure is going to take that bait and they're going to act upon it. And this 31-year-old man is sitting there out there talking to the youth and influencing what they do politically, and they're changing the dynamic from what it has been when they've had a monopoly on the mindset of those who are being uh, uh, taught, taught in a certain direction. And the direction is really going in one direction, is going to the left. And we don't even see the movement because the movement is so subtle and incremental. And we don't see the movement, constant movement, as they're shifting the country further and further to the left, very slowly. But the ultimate goal is clear if you've been watching the pattern. And Charlie Kirk got caught up in that. And this guy that did the shooting, I'm looking at him and studying that background, and I can see the vortex, the whirlwind, the whirlpool like environment that was created in which he is in fact operating. And they didn't know it would be that person, but if it had not been him, it would be somebody else. As they continue to see the environment until they get someone to act upon it. It's a phishing. They don't even call it, they call it phishing. Phishing. I've seen that word online a lot of times. But you were throwing, where it's like fishing, but it's like you're throwing an idea out there, and you're getting people to act upon the idea, and you can't trace it back. That's what makes it so dangerous. It can't be traced back to a source because it's not like you're whispering in anybody's ear, and you can say to this person, maybe he'll say it to another person, and there's a chain of command in which it goes into different ears and out of the mouths of different mouths, and one to the other, and you can just backtrack it back and so on and so forth. People were asking me when I was writing about it, they were asking me if he acted alone. You think he acted alone? Alone? Was he in fact acting by himself? And the answer to that is not in the way in which you would understand it and you would in fact depict it, because that's not how that's not how it operates. That's not even how it operated when they murdered a president in 1963. It wasn't that they had uh, a whole lot of people investing in it, and in it, and some of the ones who were blamed for it, Oswald, for example, as a shooter, and they have framed Lee Harvey Oswald, is that he would he could not be allowed to survive the interrogation he would have had to go through because he would have been able to tell how he had been guided without his knowledge. Of course, when the president was shot and he's accused of it, and away from the crime, nobody even saw him. And how would you know he was him? But look at how they showed up wherever he was at that theater, Ford Theater, and they went in there and began to make the accusation he killed the president. Now, the president been killed across town, and here they're saying when they turn those lights up in the theater, they were saying, kill the president, huh? Would you? And that leap of faith is very indicative of prior knowledge, isn't it? Because they had their passage already lined up. I'm just telling you scholars about this because you've done some good. Some of you have done some good work in terms of how they set that up in Dallas, but you not. But you have not put the same analysis on that I'm putting on it because there is a nuance point to be made. The foreknowledge, I'm looking at the foreknowledge in terms of Oswald going to that theater, and if he's involved in the shooting, then why would he go to a place where he can be hemmed up like that? Could I ask that question? But he's going there, and I know he went there to see. I know why he went there. He went to see David Allen Phillips, Adley Phillips, who was a CIA controller of Latin America and was directing the events in the Western Hemisphere. And that was Oswald controller. And he went there because he had been told to come there. They thought that, actually, I think, based upon a lot of the evidence of things I've uncovered and looking at this case over the course of 40 years, and I've been looking at it from a lot of different angles and just trying to piece together how this was constructed, because you have to think about why things are moving the way they are moving and how is it moving and the persons that are in back of it and what the connections are to what is a center of control, a control center. And once you can begin to put the dots together, you can then go behind that and see what is the point, what are the points of communication that are involved in it. I mean, why would Oswald go to a theater like he did, having been inside of the school book depository in Dealey Plaza, on the second floor, by the way, not on the sixth floor, but on the second floor in the cafeteria. And we know that from the fact that the officer that ran into that building was on that second floor trying to go up to the sixth floor where the shot had been, where one of the shots had been fired, and ran up those stairs and got to the second floor. And anyone that was in the vicinity of where he was going up that flight of stairs to the sixth floor would have been a suspect, because you know who has come down or who has gone up. All you know was that that bullet had come from one of the firing angles was that building. It's not the only place that they were perched, but that's one of the places. And maybe the firing on the sixth floor, this is my conjectural point, but it's not the main thing that would connect to what I'm saying about that, how that was set up. But certainly one of the conjectural points to be made is that the firing on the sixth floor was just one of the areas of the shooters, and that was where the plant was to be made of Oswald, because Oswald was in that building, and his connection was such that they had been moving around, and he did not know until the deed was done, the fact of the president was murdered and so on and so forth, that he would be able to put together why the movement that he was involved in was was being ordered, because he was moving around in a way in which there were certain things that went on. For example, the alias that the the gun, one of the two guns, they found two guns on the sixth floor of the school book depository building. One was a German Mauser, 6.5 caliber German Mauser, Mauser, and the other one was a 7 point six, 7 point something Mauser, and then a 6.5 a tank Gunner rifle. They would later on reduce it down to a single rifle found on that sixth floor, because that would be the rifle in which can they had through this guy named Alex Hadell, which was the assumed name that Oswald was using as a name that was being used under the CIA's umbrella. I'm just telling you the truth here, and you can go and check this out for yourself. And so they dropped the one, and then they went with the Concana rifle, because that rifle could be identified with Oswald, but under Oswald's assumed CIA name, Alex Hadeel. And so there was a framing that went on, and so on and so forth. When you understand the pattern, you can see it whenever anything goes on. But that's one way in which that was in 1963, November the 22nd of that year. But I'm talking about, you see how you graduate and you refine, but the pattern, there are some things in the pattern will be the same, but you refine it and so on. And what they're doing it now is they simply will throw the bait out there. If you notice, they use the same wording. And in fact, when you look at the left and you see the reports on TV, and that you'll see them all talking have the same talking point. Everything's about they want to save our democracy. That the persons that are obstinate, they do not want to bring that about. They are the ones that are against democracy, and they're also the ones who are racist. And some that out there will buy into, because they're people that want to do the right thing. They don't have all the information and don't know how you guide people through people who have already been placed into a vortex of psychosis, who don't realize that they're inside of a matrix, and they are acting within a vortex. And it's like you got fish in the ocean, and they don't know the guy above them is throwing that line out there. Now you do see those fish going around that line trying to study it, and because they kind of think something may be going on here, but can't quite figure it out. If you dangle that thing long enough, they will try to snap onto it, and that's when you got them. That guy throws that hook over that way to get that hook into the upper part of their mouth, because your mouth can get you in trouble, because your mouth doesn't always follow your mind. And that's how they operate, and that's the vortex in which Charlie Kirk's death was engineered. And this killer that acted, who had, and I can tell you there was a vortex involved in it, because the reports that's coming out right now is that the trans now, we've created a trans gender in the country. The trans boyfriend girlfriend that he had, who is now singing to the feds, because that person, I don't think, was involved in anything. Well, we'll find out if that's true. But there's definitely some information they're getting from this person who he was intimately involved with, who was a trans, and that's another thing they've done in terms of creating this environment. And they have pretty much concluded that this person was not being ordered directly by anybody. Certainly not the person that he was, in fact, intimately involved with. That's not how they're doing it anyway anymore. They're not doing it through this passing one hand to another where you can trace it back. If you go back, you'll find from this point, you find that point. That's not the way in which it's done. The way it's done now is you create the environment, and you can sit back and just wait until something happens, that someone is acting upon the environment that you're seeding, and you're doing it in a way in which to guide the behavior without knowing who will in fact be involved in the behavior. This person doesn't know anything other than that they had that gun up there on that uh, on that in that building from 200 yards away to two football fields. And if you got a scope, you can bring that target right up to your right up to that gun. You can bring that target that close to where you are in fact standing there. You have to be a very cruel, cold-hearted person, and you have to also get past some of the things that you've been raised with in terms of these things you're taught as a child. Thou shalt not kill, things like that, and you have to get past that so that you can override that information. You see, you've got this idea that killing is wrong, but you have to override that, and override how you override it is that you have the person thinking he's doing this. What's that word? The uh, suborder, the sub something where you have the greatest good for the greatest number. When you're doing something that you, a great good that you're doing in the act that overrides the other thing, because the idea that you have, this is conjectural on my part, the idea you have is you are doing something that will save the things you've also been taught, because of, some of these people are acting like who think they're acting patriotically. It plays out a lot of different ways, and I think that Charlie Kirk got caught up in some of that. But you have to understand who he was. Who he was. He's not who they're saying he was. This man was going on that college campus into the area that was seeding the environment, which the left has a monopoly on right now. I was on the campus, so I know this to be true. Where the monopoly was that the left has captured that market, that constituency has been captured by the left. All of the teachers, when I say all, I don't mean every last one, but I'm saying that what they've done over time, because this is not something that you can do through happenstance. This is something that they've been seeding the environment for a long time, and I know that to be the case, and I can put it together as being the case because all the movement is in one direction. If it was just by happenstance, sometimes you would have the country moving left, and sometimes you would have the country swinging to the right. And the country has not been swinging to the right. You've been having persons that are more that's to the right of center, but for example, you may have Goldwater running against Lyndon Baines Johnson. That's when you had Johnson doing that thing with the little girls out there playing with the flowers, and they're saying 10. He comes on 10, 9, 8, and then pow, you're supposed to be blown into smithereens. And that was aimed at Barry Goldwater, the scaremongering. If you vote for this guy, he's gonna get the world blown up. And then you feather the environment so that people think they're doing something to stop the calamity, and you can actually see how they operate to create these kinds of they work they there's a book out. I think you need to read this book, written by Dr. Lyle Rossiter, Rossitr. Has a book out. I forget the year it was written. It's been out for a while. I've had my copy for about 6 years or so, but it's been out longer than that. I can't get. I wish I could remember the date. But the book is called The Liberal Mind. The Liberal Mind, Mind. The psychological causes. This is a subtitle. The psychological causes of political madness. And I would admonish Dr. Rosita. He writes a very interesting book and a very interesting narrative. And it's a you see, we have to start doing psychological analyses now. And I remember when I was in psychology class in undergrad school, and I saw everybody that comes to Psychology 101, you go through the conditioning through Pavlov's dogs. You learn conditioned response in that class, and they know how to work condition and response. That's something they've had for a long time, and of course that's what you have when it's written in this book, 3-volume work by this Canadian Wilson Brian Key, who wrote 3 volumes: Subliminal Seduction, Media Sexploitation, and the Clam Plate Orgy and Other Subliminal Manipulations. That's 3 different volumes. And you have to read all, you don't have to read all three. I read all 3 of them, but you can read, if you read Subliminal Seduction, you pretty much got your handle on some techniques that are being used here. Or you can go back to 1954, 1955, in the writing of the book by Vance Packard called The Hidden Persuaders. That's a very good book also. And that's kind of like the throwing out there something that we are not being taught in any schools anywhere, there where Packard is talking about people that's not sight unseen, that's behind the scenes, but manipulating the environment and conditioning it, Pavlov's dogs and so on and so forth, being conditioned. So you don't see the hand that's not just the hand that rocked the cradle, but the hand that is in fact guiding and pushing incrementally where it can't hardly be detected. But when you have something going the same direction all the time, the law of physics does not allow that, because sometimes it'll go in this direction if it's not being guided, then it will go another direction because the law of probability. It's like you flip a coin up, and 50% of the time, a little bit, maybe a little bit more on one side than the other, but 50% of the time it will come down heads, and 50% of the time, or close to it, will come down tails. But if it comes down head all the time or come down tails all the time, then that's being guided by a force that's not seen, because that's not the probability of that is 0. So you can look at probability, and the pushing is always to the left. Even when you have someone that's running and they get in there to the right, the pushing doesn't change. The direction doesn't change. It hasn't changed even with Trump. Trump is president, but when Trump was president in 2016, they're not really planned for it, and they thought it was a shoe in that Hillary Rodham Clinton, who was a proselyte, yes, the one that wrote the book called Rules for Radicals. You need to read that book. Saul Alinsky. She and Barack Obama were both acolytes of Saul Alinsky. In his book, the 12 rules he lays out in that book, you should read that book. But we're not a reading society anymore. We're a visual society. So when you're teaching in the classes now, you have to put visuals up there so people can see it. They can't fathom it. The imagination has been changed over time, so you can't read and then imagine. And people do not understand, as they did back in the day, that you have to teach people to dream with their eyes open. Used to. Okay, it's a long story, but you need to go and just read more. we need to have readers in society now. We don't have that as a way we condition through what we read. That you just open a world up through attacking the written word and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm coming to my point, but I'm just making hopefully I'm making you see that there's a conditioning that's going on, and it's been written about. Uh, Frank Makowicz has a book out uh, about the media, and other writers have written about it. The media manipulation. Of course, you see it all the time. The commercials they are they understand how to make an impact on your subliminal thinking. And given the amount of the money they have to spend on advertising, now they have to do that within a very short period of time because you're not paying even for a minute of advertising with one of the advertisers. They value it up 15 seconds here, maybe another advertiser comes on, and he pays for some advertising. And then in the minutes that a program comes on for an hour, you'll have 39 minutes of the program and 21 minutes of the advertising. So they'll do 2/3 of one and 1/3 of the other, and they have you captured there. In fact, if they can't capture your attention by the program, that program goes off the air because they have to have so many advertisers that they capture to bring the viewers to the advertisers. That's what the program is about: bring the viewers to the advertising. And the advertisers have after they have gotten the program to bring them to the advertisers, they have to make an impact on the attention span of the viewers because the attention span of the viewers has been conditioned to be very short range. In programs like Laugh In, programs like that, or also the programs they're doing right now, where used to be where they could build the humor up, where you have to pay attention so you could connect it up over time, where the ha-ha points are. But now they got them laughing at everything that's being said. The laughing points are more immediate. So it's one joke after another, and so on and so forth. It's a lot of things I can say here, but I want to just make. I'm just trying to make the point here as delicately as I can, and as finely as I can, that there's a certain amount of manipulation and there's a certain way in which it's being carried out today. That it changes with the time, but the larger patterns, are about the same. If you understand the pattern, you can then fit into the context how it's played out based upon the larger view of how the environment has been manipulated. But that comes out of some reading that you're going to have to do on your own, and we're not so much about doing that as much as we once were. But some of those persons that came up without television, or you had one TV as they did when I came up, you don't have it always around you, so you have to find some other outlet to entertain yourself. We did it through reading comic books and reading on different levels of our you know development. And when I was in elementary school, and I was reading those stories from the Graham's book. Some good books, some good reading. I didn't understand all the things behind the stories, but after a while there's a lot of learning to be going on in those stories. Hansel and Gretel and things like that. Three Little Pigs and that story. Just little stories that you're getting. And when you get older, you go back and say, "Wow, there was some things in back of it." I even in the okay, I'm getting off. I don't want to go too far, but just take my word for it. Go back and look at some of your own studies, and you come up. You see there's a pattern in terms of how the manipulation is being carried out. So I do understand this guy, and I do see the manipulation that he was involved in. He can't tell you a lot, and all that person that was his trans girlfriend, which would be in this case here a girl who now is claiming um, a gender, which you can't change the gender by wishing it into existence. And those who say that if they think they're a woman, then they are a woman, because his idea there would be that a man thinketh, so is he. Yes, that's true in his thinking, though. It doesn't change the reality. So the person thinketh, yes, he is that or she is that in their thinking. The reality is unchanged because nature doesn't care about that. Nature is dictatorial. And so those that have gone off on that sphere of influence and have gotten into that cycle of thinking in a vortex through which they can be manipulated to then act upon other things that they're creating for that as well, and they just see the environment and then get someone to act upon it. Don't know who the person will be, but that's what happened to Kirk. And I wrote about it last week in four different instances, and I want to give, I want to, in his memory, because we lost a good man, and I want to say a poem in behalf of the memory of Charlie Kirk because he was very much deserving of it. And I want to recite this poem that comes from the pen of Claude McKay in 1919. And the poem is called If We Must Die. And the poem says the following: If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mark, M-O-C-K, making their mark at our cursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our dying shall not be in vain. So even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsman, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave. What though lies before us but the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. And that's why I wrote in one of my posts last week that we are not going to take this anymore. And I'm glad to see today that Charlie Kirk is being honored on these college campuses because Charlie Kirk is the influence why Trump is president right now. Again, the 45th and 47th, because if you go look at these statistics, which is written about by Ann Coulter, by the way, because Ann Coulter, there's some things I think she fell off the wagon on, but I give her a lot of credit because she is an out of the box thinker. And sometimes she's a little bit further out the box thinking than I would like for her to be, but I'm not one that's going to claim that I have all of the knowledge to know who should say this at this time, who should say that at this time. But I give her a lot of credit because she understands what so few persons understand about what happened in 2024 because when Ann Coulter wrote about maybe about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, she wrote an article where she was talking about how Donald Trump had only captured one demographic out of all the constituencies that are voting nationally in these campaigns that you're running for president. There's only one demographic where Donald Trump got the majority in that demographic, and that's a white demographic. Every other constituent group, he pulled some votes out of those groups, but the only one that got a majority to vote in any of the other groups was a white demographic. But what was really astonishing in that demographic is that Donald Trump also got the youth vote, the youth white vote. And when you understand that, you understand Charlie Kirk. Because on these college campuses right now, and I've been on the college campus, I taught on the college campus, and I sat in these meetings with these professors on these college campuses. At least three of them, and I'm very much aware of the mindset because in those seminars, you can see the seasoning that is taking place, and I saw the seasoning because I was right there in those seminars with them and listening to what they were saying and so on and so forth. And I'm sitting here because I'm thinking about how it was when I was in undergrad school and how much things have changed in that time period. I'm talking about the in the when I got my first degree. I'm talking about it in the let's see, the first degree is 1966. Yeah, and then my second degree was in 1977, I think it was, from Eastern. I think it was either get a little older. It's either 77 or 78, one of those two. I had to look at the degree. I think there was seven. I think it was 77 or 78, and then in '94, I got my PhD degree from Eastern. And I would tell you that in that time period, I wasn't aware of it so much then as I am now, but there was a little shifting going on. Not so much that it it wasn't that much. I'm trying to think, was it really that different in terms of the ideology? In terms, could I detect the ideology as much as it can be detected in the classroom now? Because they're not. It's no longer behind a disguise. It's it's now more out in the open. There's some things you can't say in the college classroom now, or you be penalized because the left has a grip on the classroom now, and if you're outside that orbit, uh, your grade will suffer because they're going to penalize you, and that's a big change than what it was before. I don't think that I was getting a lot of red marks in my papers, but I took that just in the fact that they were simply writing on red in that red ink they were writing in. I just thought they were just challenging the point of view that I had and trying to drive me to another level above the level in which I was writing because they were always writing a lot of things back to what I was writing in my papers. But I now look back at it a little bit differently than I was at that time. But I didn't see that there was a shift going on. Now it's so noticeable you cannot deny it. So I wanted to honor this man, and I wanted to say something about what is going on here and the context in which it plays out because the country's under attack. And if the country's under attack, it cannot be under attack in full assault unless you're also assaulting the foundation of which the country is, in fact, the foundation of which it is supposed to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. The republic has to be under attack, and the foundation upon which it stands has to be under attack as well. And that's where the attack is, in fact, being directed now. And Charlie Kirk paid that price. There's a video I was watching, which it's very, very well done. They have Charlie Kirk wearing these wings. He's up in the clouds, and he's saying that I think this is AI, and they have him saying that you're saddened by my loss, but I'm in a better place now. And he got him saying some things about the fight to be waged against these dark forces and so on. It's a well done piece, and Charlie Kirk is speaking to the person left behind and saying that the fight must continue, and we have to stand up more so now than it was when he was here. They think that they killed the message he was bringing, but that message, you cannot kill the idea, you can kill the person. And they got him saying that. And they got some of the speeches there mixed in and clipped it so that it makes the point. And that is very is riveting, and it's inspiring, and it really is the reason why we study history and so on and so forth. I mean, there are three reasons why we study history, and that's what he's doing in that tape is one of them. We study history to gain inspiration, and that clip inspires us so that we learn through the martyrdom to look at what the person was doing to, in fact, he brought it upon himself. And we want to imitate that, because in history, what you do also to study, in studying history, you learn to imitate its best examples. And Charlie Kirk was a good example to be emulated. And their meeting in Lansing, I found this out by reading Facebook today. I found out that uh, they are honoring Kirk on all the on many of the college campuses around the nation in celebration of this man's legacy. This man was only 31 years old. It's so sad that he had little children who would never know, as they grew up, would never know their dad. His wife lost, she lost her husband, and that killer took that away from the children and took the husband away from the wife. And the ones that caused it will never be brought to justice, because it's more than just the one who pulled the trigger, but the ones who created the environment through which that act would be carried out. Because these people are very clever, and he can only talk about it from the standpoint of what his actions were, because he doesn't even know subliminally how that was in fact created. So what can even though he lived, what can he say? The devil made me do it, or I know I had a blackout and I acted and so on. You see, he doesn't know, and that is part of the matrix, as they say. And so I title this the Constitution, because that's what was being represented here by what Charlie Kirk was in fact doing. And we don't realize how much of the Constitution is being removed from the environment that we're in, because the Constitution is what this is really all about.
Wait till you see what the law was. The guy who introduced that bill, so the anti BDS for Israel is a guy named Lawler. I think he's out of New York. Yeah, and basically will give a fine of $1 million and 20 years in prison if somebody starts a boycott thing against Israel.
Yeah.
That's a constitutional right, by the way, folks. To actually, that's a form of that's an extension of the First Amendment. They're going to be able to rebel, to protest something you don't like by saying, let's walk with our feet and not give them our money. And that's when the basic we're not allowed to even discuss this now.
Yeah, John, they're
It's
doing that.
passed in the House, by the way.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true. And you'd be surprised at how widespread that is now in the West because this is what Farage is doing in Europe. Hopefully, he'll be able to get in. He's running for prime minister now of England. England now is as is the other part of Western Europe is now part of the Middle East because that's the kind of burden they're now being carried. The only one that's standing out there very much against the movement in Europe that is now becoming the Middle East is the person that is the president and leader of Hungary, which is Victor
Orban.
yeah,
Orban.
Urban. Yeah, that's the person who is standing resolutely because he sees what's going on, and you would think they would have caught on by now, but not really because they are falling into the same trap after others have fallen into it prior to them. Look what Sweden did with all this history to show where this was heading to. They jumped right into it and continued this march away from their own values and their own culture. And now they're caught up into it, and now they're being victimized by the things that they saw going on prior to that. Things going on in England, things that were going on in Germany, things that were going on in France, et cetera, all the way down, all the way over to the eastern part of Europe. And look at the mistakes. But Urban, uh, Victor Urban, is saying not here, and they are they took all the pressure was put upon them because they were these countries that were falling by the wayside and doing things that did not serve the constituency well, and for some reason they were capitulating because they didn't want to be called racist. They say anti Islamophobic and this phobic and that. That's what Hillary Clinton was doing, and that phobic, and they want to have a racial phobic or a Semitic phobia. They don't want to be one of those phobias, and they use that sentiment of wanting to do good and not wanting to be out there doing what they have seeded the environment um, to be avoided at all costs. They don't want to be part of that, so their energy is to not be a part of that, and thereby not doing that, they'll they'll turn their countries over. And Victor Orban and some of the others are resisting of that. You look at Orban is going to go down in history as one of the saviors if Europe can be saved at this point, and that's a big question mark. If you go and read the book America Alone, go read that book, America Alone, Alone, and read that book where on the front cover of that book they have flags in different parts of the globe. They have the globe here as they have the world as a globe, which is now being contested because people have stopped buying the science that's taught in these schools. And yeah, that there's another discussion going on about that, the brainwashing that went on with that. If they okay, so they're challenging everything now. They're challenging all the things they've been taught because the ruling class has been doing these things behind the scenes for a long time. But in his book by Jonah Goldberg called America Alone, he has this on the front cover of the book. They got a globe, and they got maps all around on that globe around the United States and saying America alone, because those flags are being planted now around on this globe as if the world is really a globe and if the earth is really round rather than flat. I know that's going to be a shock because that's another discussion we got to have as well. Talk to the pilots about it, and talk to the people that simply have made this put an airplane up in the air, and let's say that the Earth is moving at the rate of speed 1,000 miles an hour, or whatever you say the speed of it orbiting and that and moving. If the airplane gets up in the air, see if the airplane lands by being up in the air, is it spinning around away detached from the Earth, to see if it then lands in another part of the Earth as it's rotating on it, and so on and so forth. Or let's just see what these pilots say when they're flying these airplanes and what they would have as an understanding, and was in the oceans, and see if the oceans in fact have the water tumbling all over the place and pouring out because of the topsy-turvy moving at that rate of speed and circling, and that water being what, thrown up in the air, and see all these little things that you don't think about when you're being indoctrinated, which is which has been going on for a long time. And anyway, it is now we beginning to see that maybe things are not operating quite the way in which has been manufactured. That's been what they that's what it's a manufactured environment. These manufacturers of reality. When there is, you go back and look at ancient texts, there's one. There's one, and you see that through the eye of Horus on your dollar bill, a symbol of there being one. The eye of That's the eye of Horus. And the story is, in ancient times, the eye was was thrown into different parts. Each part of the eye being a certain percentage of the whole. The eyebrow, for example, which is the eyebrow of Horus, you see that in the music class where the eyebrow is a 1/8 note, the little eyebrow symbol in music on that staff that you have in the music class, and that little D-like symbol that is a 1/32 note, but you add up all those different parts of that note that has a hidden meaning in it, and it comes out to 63/64. And it doesn't add up to 64/64, because what the meaning and the symbol of that is that there's only one, and so everything is a fraction of that. And that's the Masonic understanding of the world. It's not given out to the masses because the world has never been given the secret information, or you could say it a different way, the sacred information, because the sacred information is secret and not to be given holistically to the masses, who are considered to be the vulgar, the uninitiated, and so on and so forth. I can give you a lot of books to read, but we will one day do a story. We'll do a program on that. But this has got to be understood on this level here today, on the level in which Charlie Kirk life was sacrificed. As a person that was the custodian of the Constitution of the United States. And this man was only trying to say, as dangerous as it was to say it, is that we have in our Constitution, a separation of powers. And in that separation, there are things that you can do and you cannot do based upon the Constitution, which restrains power from going out of control, because of power, as they did it at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, they constructed another way of doing what they tried to do in 1781. They drew up the Articles of Confederation as they were refining the idea of what had to be done here. What had to be done here was to restrain power. That much they knew. But they restrained it by simply not giving the central power any authority to do anything, unless they had the unanimity of all the states that were in the creation of the federal government to, in fact, agree to that. And that stifled the federal government from being able to act, because when you get to have unanimous agreement, it's very hard to do that, because when you get in unanimous agreement, someone's going to be the bugaboo in that agreement, and they're not going to go along with it because they don't see it through the same eyes as maybe the 12 saw it through, that Rhode Island didn't see it that way. And all 12 of them saw it in a certain way. Rhode Island was a holdout and didn't even send anybody to the Constitutional Convention because they didn't agree with what they were doing there. It's hard to get unanimity. But one of the things they did there that was of some consequence to us to understand today is that they did find another way to restrain power, where you simply divide it so that no corridor of power of the three corridors they created in Articles 1, 2, and 3, no corridor would have all the power concentrated in the singularity of that particular construction. That's what the Articles did. It put the singularity into one body. In that one body, they went there we went there to the convention, and they went there with the idea that the construction cannot be limited inside of a single body. So Articles 1, 2, and 3 set up three different distinct corridors of power, through which those three corridors of power will be extents of his own power, jealous of his own power, and not willing to give it over to the other two branches that were created, because you already had a legislative branch. You didn't have an executive branch that was able to act independent of that. And they corrected that and refined it and got to another point of understanding on a different level and created all three branches. That's the genius of that convention. I said in the article that I did that there was something that they could not do and was outside of the purview of what they could do. They did, in fact, move against the people that had sent them there on that mission. They did, in fact, go against the reason for their being there based upon why they had been sent to that convention, but they could not do, based upon where they were at that point in time, they could not do that which needed to be done, which was to overthrow the political unit to which they had been sent to Philadelphia, which would have necessitated them repudiating the politicians in whose name they were in fact meeting. They had not gotten to the point of being able to repudiate the politics and therefore deal with the contradiction of their being there, because contradiction was what James Madison wrote about in Federalist Paper 51, where James Madison looked into the contradiction, which was the contradiction was you need government. You need a restraining force to restrain people who will go out of control if that force does not exist. But at the same time, you need to also find a way to control the forces you put in place to control the masses, because you can't have the masses going helter skelter. You see what's happening right now as an example of that. People will go out of control. Look at Chicago and look at Illinois. Look at Chicago for the person who want to look at the numbskull that's running Chicago. This uh, uh, Johnson, and then look at this sycophant idiot that is over the state, J.B. Pritzker. Look at this guy, and you see that you see how you have to have you have to restrain. Government has restrained the people, but then when the government is set there to restrain the people, you must have an instrument to restrain government also. Look at how Chicago, the city, is out of control, and look at how the governor, who's over the state, is out of control also. What are you going to do when they come for you? And that is what you got to deal with. Yeah, there's a lot of angles to this, but they did what they could, and they came to an understanding. You have to restrain the people, but the restrainer of the people has to also be restrained, and nobody's figured out how to in fact do that. But that was a task beyond that which they had figured out that had to be done, beyond what they understood had to be done, and that was to go beyond not only their assignment, which was to fix the articles and reframe and to refine it so they could do the job that was not being done by it being set up because it was too restrictive, but to also fix the thing that James Madison's writing about in the second grade as well. I think the first grade is, quite frankly, they say that Pharaoh's paper 10 is the greatest of the Pharaoh's papers. Maybe 51 is greater, and they had to deal with that. But we have a martyrdom here, and we've had other martyrs in the past, and we have to understand what is going on in our country. If we're going to save the country, we got to understand what's taking place here. And Charlie Kirk was martyred again, another martyr. And we've got to understand the martyrdom and why, if we're going to change the trajectory of where this country is headed, because it's heading toward chaos. That's why I keep saying we have to move back toward the framers. And that is a must if we're going to save America. The Constitution, the separation of powers, and the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, all that within a context, a vortex, to be understood if this man's life is going to mean anything consequential as we go down the line and down the road to arrive at a different place than where we are right now, because this country is in tremendous trouble, and we've got to reclaim some things here. And we can only do it in the name of those that set this experiment up some 200 and some odd years ago. As we come up on the 250th anniversary of America, we're going to sing the Lord's song, not in a strange land, but in the land that was created by the framers of the United States. That has to be done. Okay, we got to get out of here. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.